Hey, you made it! Thank you very much and welcome. I really appreciate your support. I designed this kit because I think it's going to help a lot of people get into making this. It's just going to eliminate a lot of questions like, well, is this going to fit these strings? Is that going to be the right tuning peg? Here it is. It's all in one. You can start learning how to do it from here. The idea is this is your first guitar, and you can always take this thing apart and make another one later. Pretty much every part you're going to be able to recycle and reuse if you decide that this first guitar isn't good enough. But this will get you started. You can go and upgrade from here too and buy better parts and learn. This is going to demystify making guitars for a lot of you. If you're here, that means you bought either the entire kit or just the template. So if you bought just the template, you're going to have to fill in some dots about which parts to get. You'll probably be able to guess by looking at everything. Regardless of that, the only other thing I wanted to ask you is please don't share this video outside of us, because I can't give everything away for free all the time. I am trying to make a living here. So just I really want the people that deserve this, that bought into it, to get it, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your support, and I hope you have so much fun making a guitar, and I hope you learn from this. I originally started, when I started filming this, I figured I'd just make one like half-hour long video, and I realized that I had so much information to put in. I'm actually going to split this up into a couple different videos. So there's going to be one video that's going to be about what to do with the template, how to create your own templates, and how to make your body. There's going to be another video that's going to be about assembling the guitar and setting it up and getting it to play good and doing some potential fret work and whatnot. And then there's going to be another video that's going to be about wiring it up and doing the electronics. So strap in, watch the videos, make a guitar. Now what I would suggest is watching these videos from beginning to end, maybe even on 2x speed or something, so you can see the whole process before you start cutting and sawing and hacking. If your kit is missing any parts, please let me know, and I will get it to you ASAP. Don't be shy. And if you have any questions, feel free to email them to me at tim@newperspectivesmusic.com, and I will get back to you and I will do my best to answer them. If the same questions come up quite a bit, I may potentially put another video up on that page, the downloads page, and share that information like that. And of course, share your pictures of your guitars when they're done. Share them on social media. We should create a hashtag, right? Whoever the first one is to put it up, you make up the hashtag and we'll stick with it. Okay, ready? Let's dig in. I am using the kit for the first time right now, just like you will. So I might make a few mistakes, but I'll clear it up and we'll learn along the way. Obviously I've made these guitars before, but I've just got the kit just like you'll receive out in front of me, and I'm going to make it the way I would make it if I were buying that kit. The tools I'm going to use are all, for the most part, just basic homeowner's tools. If you have a bandsaw, if you have a table saw and all that stuff, by all means use it. Make your life easier, but I'm going to do it the hard way. Before we do anything, I've got my parts laid out here. You can see these are all my hardware parts in a bowl and my pickups. And I have my strings, I have my neck, I have my templates, and I went to the downloads page and I printed out the body of the frontman guitar of mine and pasted that onto this piece of 1/4" MDF, which I'm going to cut out to use as a template. So this is the template that you will get in the mail, and you'll see that I left all of the inserts in there as well because they might come in handy for planning and laying out. The first thing I would recommend doing is making a copy of this template. And there's a couple reasons. One is if you mess it up, you're out, and now you've got a messed up template. And it's easier to do than you'd think. And that's really the main reason. The other reason is if you have a piece of scrap that's a little bit bigger, it's going to make it easier for you to clamp it down in the future. You could just use this, but why not just make another one, put this aside, and then if you mess up this one, you can make another one again. You could not do this step where I'm making a body template. You could just freehand it and cut it out. You don't have to use my body either. You could do whatever style you want. That's the beauty of this template, is you can put this template down on just about anything. These are all lined up to perfectly work, and then I can go and I can draw whatever kind of guitar shape I want and cut it out. On the template, everything is all lined up and perfectly straight. So if you put these pickups here, they're gonna line up. And I cut this hole out. You're never gonna actually route with this, but I cut this out because this is where your bridge is gonna go. And you can use this to actually pop your bridge in and make little marks of where the holes are gonna go. And we'll talk about that later in the setup. I also put these center lines, the center line down here, and I put this line here, which is exactly where the strings are gonna sit on the bridge. 99%, look at the camera for this, 99% of making guitars is like planning. And in that planning, a millimeter is a mile. So that's why we want to do all of our measuring and stuff really carefully, and that's why I made this template like this, because it eliminates some of those things that can go wrong. Now when I cut out this body, before I do that, I'm going to take this template and I'm going to line it up with the ink here, and this might not be perfect because, you know, I was pasting it together, but it's pretty close. And I'm actually going to cut out these pickup holes, but I'm not going to cut the neck out. I'm going to leave that hole, and that will all make sense a little bit later. Let's talk a minute about some of the tools you're going to use. Most of the tools that we have here are basic, like even homeowner tools for the most part. You know, talking about like impact cordless drill, sanders. I'm going to use probably 2 different sanders. I have this palm sander, and I also have this very inexpensive belt sander. I'm not using my bandsaw, so I'm going to use a jigsaw. You'll probably end up using rasps and files and screwdrivers and stuff like that. Of course, you might find yourself needing a chisel. I use these digital calipers a lot because, like I said, a millimeter is a mile when you're making guitars. So if you don't have a digital caliper, that's something you might want to invest in. They have these right at the box store. They also make them that are not digital. They have a little dial, and they're a little cheaper, but the digital ones are only a few bucks more. I would say go all the way. You need some clamps. You're going to need some glue and some tape and stuff like that, probably. You will need a little piece of aluminum foil out of your kitchen. Yeah, it's really simple stuff. The one special tool that you might not own if you're just a homeowner and not a woodworker is a router. Now, routers are not too expensive. You can pick up, this one's probably a little bit bigger than what you even need, but I would get at least a 1 horsepower router. And you can get these for about $100 at the hardware store. This is the key to using these templates and to making nice guitars. You do not need a router. You could do it all with a chisel and a hammer and a drill and all that stuff, but it's going to take a lot longer. And this whole setup is kind of built around using a handheld router with what's called a pattern bit. The whole key to this build is that all these templates provide guides for that bearing to roll across. So now I can follow the lines with this router bit and get these perfectly even lines and cut out my pockets and cut out my shapes. It's all about that bearing. It's all about this router bit. So it's pretty important for this. And again, you can do it by hand, but it's going to take you a heck of a lot longer if you do. This is a standard like 1 inch long, 1/2 inch pattern bit. You can get this at the box store. It's probably about 20-25 bucks. And you can do everything with this. But I would recommend also getting a shorter one. Now this one's only about a 1/2 inch tall. And I bought this online. I actually bought a 3-pack online of like a 1/2 inch, a 3/4, and a 1 inch. And they're just cheap ones. And I think it was like $10 for all 3 of them. So they're not great router bits, but they work. And the reason you might want to use this, if you line up your bearing on the template, your first pass is as deep as this bit. Right? So if we do this, and we're going to hog some material out of the way first, we'll get into that, but if you use that 1 inch router bit now, you have to be plowing through that entire router bit cutting wood if you're using this template, unless you have a thicker template. So now if I had a thicker template, I could line up my bearing like that, and now you see I'm using less router bits, so I'm hogging away less material, so there's less stuff that's going to go wrong. You don't want to make big deep cuts because that's where things go wrong, things slide, things catch. Now we can do this with just this one router bit by taking our template and stacking it up on top of other stuff. Now remember I was talking about cutting another template? Well, right there, now if we have 2 templates, we could stack them together, and now 2 templates would give us our double-decker. And if we cut out the pockets on the body template that we're going to cut out of paper, now we have 3 layers of this template. So we can stack all 3 layers together and clamp them and then do our routing. And then after we do a pass, we could take 1 layer off, clamp it down again, do our second pass. And that way we're going to incrementally take that tall bit and bring it in deeper into the wood. And then eventually you might have to adjust the plate on the router and whatnot. But you're gonna see all this in this video, so you're gonna understand what I'm talking about. But I'm gonna use my shorter bit, which is gonna save me a lot of that work, and I should be able to do it with just 1 layer of template. Less can go wrong, there's less chance of something moving or slipping, and it's just easier. So it's worth the $10. Now, if you really think you're going to get into this and you're going to make more guitars, you can also get one of these. And this is the most awesome little 1/4 inch router bit with a very shallow depth. And so this one here works great on guitar templates because you can just go right in and just do one pass at a time. You can see if you have the bearing, you can set the bearing up so you're only cutting like a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch at a time, and that way you can get really detailed. And it's smaller, so it fits into these corners better, and it gets this entire shape. When we do this with this larger bit, we don't get the shape perfectly accurate. It works fine for the guitar, but it's just not as purty. I know I play a cowboy on YouTube with the bandana, but for this type of stuff, you need a real mask. Wear a proper mask while you're doing it. The router makes a lot of chips. Make sure you have eye protection because the router will turn you blind if you don't. There's so much stuff coming out. And hearing protection because the router is really freaking loud. I hate the sound of the router and I won't use it without something shoved in my ears. I got this piece of scrap MDF I'm throwing up here because I'm going to drill through this and I don't want to mess up my workspace. So if I take my ink lines from my template, which are accurate enough for what I'm about to do, the first thing I want to do is hog out a bunch of this material. So I have just a 3/4 inch Forstner bit. The humbucker pickups come with this trim ring, so the hole actually gets covered by the trim ring, and you can see it's a little bit oversized to make things easy. The P90 pickup fits right in this hole and it screws right into the body through that hole, so this edge will be seen on the P90 one. Lining up all my lines to make sure everything's nice and straight. This little countersink, and I'm going to countersink a couple of these holes to put screws in, and they're my router plate. It doesn't get hung up on it when I'm sliding around trying to follow through on the templates. Use this little corner here. Clamp this right here. About halfway on there. And using these bearing templates is to just put a little bit of oil on them each time you use them because the bearings do get hot. Wait until it spins down all the way before moving it. Now mark these holes here so I can draw my center line in. Perfect. And this should almost not fit. Yeah. Okay, next up I'm going to cut this body out. What I want to do is I want to follow my exterior line, and I'm going to use my jigsaw because I'm doing hand tools, but I want to go way on the outside of the line, like by at least 1/8 of an inch. I want to make sure I leave that line because jigsaws are not super accurate. Sometimes the blade will actually sort of bend in on you, so even though you're following the line on the top, on the bottom the blade will be a little crooked and it'll be smaller. So we want to give ourselves plenty of room to go and clean this edge up by hand later. It's only 1/4 inch MDF and it's easy to do. I have these big heavy steel weights that I can use to help put on here to keep things from sliding on me. And I'm going to go carefully and slowly. There we go, now we're pretty close. You can see that I am outside the line. There's a million ways you can get your final shape on your guitar body. If you have bench top sanders and belt sanders and whatnot, that's great. You could take this belt sander and clamp it into a vise and use it like a bench top sander. you know, for curves, things like this work really well because I have this curved edge. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this rasp because I kind of like rasp. So I'm going to clean this up with the rasp first and then give it a sand to make my edge nice and smooth. The better this template is, the better your guitar will be. So I'm going to peel the paper off so I can get a better look at it. I'm going to use some mineral spirits, and that will just soak through the paper and hit that spray glue that's in there. While I can, I'm going to take advantage of this line that I have down the center. Just going to score it right into my template. The paper's already peeling off. Nicey nice. My template's made, still drying a little bit. My scratch template in case I screw up the original and the original and all of the inserts. So it is time to start making the guitar. I need wood for a body, and there's lots of ways you could do this. Today I'm going to use these pieces of wood that are, I think they were from a piano, but they're pine, which is not the best wood to use for making guitars, but I'm going to use it anyways. And I got these two pieces that I cut this piece in half and I just glued it together as some old 70s pine with some dark stain on it. We're going to try that. I would recommend using something a little bit harder or denser than that, like maybe starting at poplar and then getting thicker and denser from there. You figure for this body style, you need a blank that's about 13 inches wide by 20 inches tall. At minimum, you know, a little bit bigger might be a little bit easier to handle. Some other bodies you might need a little bit more, you know, width or length. Some people think you need a guitar that's at least 1 5/8 inch thick or thicker. A lot of guitars are like that. I have made them as thin as 1 inch, which is a little bit too thin. This kit, and for the parts that you're going to be using here, I would recommend going around 1.5 inches, somewhere around 1.5 inches. So if you get down to even like 1.25 inches, this kit will probably still work fine. You might just need to get a couple shorter screws and the neck joint than what I'm sending you with the kit. But yeah, really 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, anywhere around there. So if you wanted to make it out of 2x4s that are 1.5 inches, glue them together and plane them down, they end up being 1 3/8 inches. Perfect. That's all you need. Guitars don't have to be super thick. You just want to make sure you have a good neck joint. Now, what do I mean by neck joint? The only reason I would avoid using pine for your guitars and soft woods like that is basically this spot right here. This is where your neck fits into your body. And if this wood is soft, you then run 4 screws in here. There's a little grommet that goes around it. If this wood is soft, this joint can get crappy and weak. And then the other thing is where you screw your bridge in here, you're just screwing this bridge right through the top, and if the wood is soft, there's a chance of it pulling up or getting sloppy or weak. That's the only reason why using a softer wood like pine is a problem for guitar. As far as tone and all that stuff, don't worry about that. We'll see how this pine does today that I'm going to use. We're going to route our pickup holes and our neck pocket into our body blank before we cut the shape out. And the reason I like to do that first is just it makes more sense while we have the straight lines in the material. Our pickups holes have to be deep enough for the humbucker to hold the humbucker pickup, the wires, and all this stuff. There's these screws that stick out of the bottom, and that's probably, as you can see, the deepest part down. So really the hole just needs to be deep enough for that screw. 0.816 inches deep. So we figure if we go to like 0.85 or so. If you're doing the P90 pickup, that sits, there's 2 screws that go through the center of it, and it sits on top of this little piece of foam. So I would say the same depth, about 0.85 inches is probably good. So that's our magic number for our pickup holes. These necks are about 1 inch thick, and the bridge and the measurements in the mouth, basically what you want to shoot for on every guitar, doesn't matter how thick the wood is, this pocket should be about 0.64 or 0.65 inches deep. The right string height, by the time the strings get over the neck and to the bridge, because the bridge has some height to it and there's adjustment height there. Then the other pocket that we're going to cut, whether it's on the front or back, is this one here. And this pocket needs to be about an inch deep, which is why you need to make your body at least 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches deep, because you need to be able to fit in this electronic part, which is 0.94 inches deep. If you have your wood as 1.25 inches, you need to leave about 1/4 inch thickness to actually screw this stuff in, and now you have no room left for a cover. You could always put the cover on the outside and have it be a raised cover, so instead of being recessed into the hole, it's on top, which is fine, and that way you get away with a little bit thinner of a body. But if you go around 1.5 inches, you've got all the room in the world to make all these things fit nicely. So this is about centered. the reason I made this new bigger template is this makes it a lot easier for me to clamp this thing down into place, and I can do all my routing. And remember, I'm not going to route this or this. I'm actually going to remind yourself not to be dumb. So by using these two templates to sort of line everything up and eyeball everything, now that I have my oversized template, I can see I have these spaces here that I'm not going to use the wood, so I can actually just run countersunk screws in here and hold my template down and route away without worrying about anything. Now you might be wondering, like, well, why didn't I just make a bigger template that was like wide, and why didn't I just make this template and include them in the kits? I did it for a couple reasons. The main reason is to save money, because if this was wider, it would have made the shipping more expensive, and if I included this, obviously it'd be much wider. And I didn't want to just make it paper template downloads, because those suck. I wanted to give you an actual tangible template. You don't need to do all this extra template stuff I'm doing. You could make this all work with just this template without creating duplicates and extra templates. You can freehand your guitar body and you can use this the whole time. I'm just saying you might choose to not use this and make another one because it's easier. If you wanted to use this, you'd be using clamps and you'd be clamping it down and moving the clamps around while you route. And this way you don't have to. Okay, do you remember our magic numbers? Our depth for our pickup pockets was 0.85 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill a hole and we're going to measure it, and we're going to stop it around 0.85 inches. We've got 1.5 inches or more of thickness, so we're not going to run out of wood, but 0.9, that's fine. Let's do this one. 0.84, close enough. I'm actually going to go under the depth on my hole that I'm going to drill here to start. 0.57, so we'll stop right there for now. Now, because I have done all of this careful prepping and planning, because I made this oversized template with the countersunk screws, and because I have this nice short router bit, I can drop this router right into the hole, and now I can just go and start following my patterns. And I can go right around. I don't have to worry about moving clamps. I don't have to worry about hitting screws. My first pass, I start in that hole that I drilled, and I do a shallow pass, as shallow as I can with that marble still on the template. And it's going to be a little bit deeper than I want to do. But so once I do a pass with this bit all the way around, I'll do all three sides. Then I can go and I can adjust the depth and go a little deeper and go a little deeper. And I might even have to take the template off to get my depth all the way down to where I need to go. And once I take the template off, I follow the part that I just cut into the body, and that's my new template. Easy peasy. In my very last pass, I take this bit and I just bottom it out right on the hole that I drilled, because that's the depth I want. And I go around and I'm done. And then if I want to adjust the depth, like on this neck one, if I do want to adjust the depth, it's only going to be a tiny bit more that I need to go down. And so I will just make a tiny adjustment on the router and just freehand, just plunge it in and go around. And you'll see how I like to get right down in here and get my face pretty close to this so I can really see what's going on in there. That helps me a lot to see what's happening and be careful, but it also increases the risk of me inhaling a lot of junk and getting a lot of junk in my eyes. So make sure you have safety protection, and it's louder because you're close to it. All right, looks good. A little extra tight, so it would be a little bit difficult to get in there. You might have to take a little chisel even and clean it up, but I think this should work pretty good. The height looks good. Nice and straight in the lines. So now we have our pickup holes, and we can line them up with this template so we know we have everything lined up properly. And we need to cut this shape out. We're going to use the pattern router bit around here, but first we're going to get a lot of this excess material out of the way with the jigsaw. So I'm going to find a pencil, triple checking that all my pockets are lined up and they're all nice and even here. This is good, and I'm going to draw this line. Now I'm going to use my jigsaw and I'm going to cut way wide of this line to get the bulk of this excess material out of the way. So you can see we're very close to the line, but I didn't touch the line. I tried to stay on the outside of it because now I'm going to clean that all up nicey nice with the router. Now I'm going to use my taller pattern router bit, my 1-inch one, and my body template. I'm going to shape this body out using those. Now there's a couple ways you could do this, and I'm going to do it probably what may seem like the worst way, but I think it's better, and I'll tell you why. You could use double-sided tape or hot glue, or you could put a layer of masking tape down here, a layer of masking tape down here, and put a bunch of super glue in between them and stick them down and make your own double-sided tape, which works better than double-sided tape. And I've never tried that with this procedure. I use that on the CNC all the time and it works great, but I never tried it with this procedure. And the reason I don't use double-sided tape or any of those other tricks is because I don't trust them. I've had them move on me in the past, and it just takes a little move like that, just a little tiny slip, for it to be a mess. So what I do is this sort of convoluted, over-engineered system of clamping. I put several clamps around the edge of the guitar. I can use my router with my pattern router bit and follow, but what happens is you run in the clamps. The reason I have several clamps is because I can take any one of these clamps off and not have it affect my template. My template will move because I still have 3 more clamps on. And as I go around, I can replace the clamps and I never have to worry about it. If I only had 2 clamps on and I took one off, then the whole thing could shift. So that's why I over clamp. This wall is going to disappear, part of it, and so we could end up having a little bit of blowout if we run the router bit up there. I think I'm going to be okay. I'm going to try it, but I might end up having to clean that area up a little bit, and then I'll have to do another pass to get to the bottom half. And I have to put it up on a little riser so there's room for the clamps to go underneath. So that's why I have it on top of these 2 steel. I'm going to use my pattern router bit now and just do another pass. I'm going to lower it a little bit. But before I forget, you can't go in around here. Maybe there's enough purchase. No, there's not. You can't, you got to be really careful in this area where there's no wall. It looks like, yep, see the bearing might hit, but it might not in there. So I'm not going to do this part. I'm going to do this part by hand because there's a chance that a lot could go wrong with that missing wood there. Remember we were talking about my little teeny tiny pattern router bit? Here's where you're going to wish you had it, because you can see I could route in. If I put the bearing right at the very edge there, I can do a very small cut into that wood. That's like, you know, 1/8 of an inch or so in for thin materials. If we didn't buy that and we're just using this one, now we're looking at a 1/2 inch pocket, which is way too deep. We can't do that. So how do we get around that? Stacking templates. So if we stack our templates, now we have that much depth, and so if we set our marble up right here, now we have a much shallower pocket, which is what we want. I'm going to make my back cavity cover out of 1/8 inch hollow core door. So I want to set my depth so it sits in there. I want it to be just a little bit deeper into the wood. I want it to be recessed a little bit. So I'm setting my depth on the router here to the depth of 2 templates plus my door, and then I go just a little bit deeper like that. Lock it into place. Check to make sure that my bearing is rolling good. Yep, so it's going to stay on there. I got most of the bearing on there, and I got just the perfect depth. After I route out my recess for my cavity plate, I'm going to use a Forstner bit, and I'm going to hog out a whole bunch of this middle area of this because that's where my electronics are going to go. So it's going to be like, you know, very deep digs. So right now I want to be able to start my router safely. I can just randomly put a hole anywhere in this area because I know it's all going to get hogged out later. Now I can drop my router in here, start it, and then go out and follow the edges. When I make my cavity cover, I'll use this as a template, or the hole, however it's going to work out best for me. And I'll cut it out and fit it in. And I need to have a couple spots where I can put screws. I gave you 4 in the kit, but 3 is really all you need. 1, 2, 3. So I need to have places where I can put those screws in here. Right, like that. And then I really want to leave a bit of an edge all the way around the edge for this to sit on when it sits in there. So that's pretty much all I need to do. Now what I can do is I can take a Forstner bit and I can just hog out all this material, checking my depth to make sure I don't go through the front, you know, obviously be careful, clean that all up, and then I can clean it up with a chisel if I want to or whatever. So my body thickness is 1.64 inches and I need to keep 2.5 a quarter inch about of wood. So watch this, we can go 0, now we can subtract 2.5 quarter inch, right? And then we can hit 0, and then we can go down here and I see I have 1.39 inches to go from this top lip. Now I can take my 1.39 inches and I can subtract it from the depth I've already done, and I can see I have 1.25 inches that I can actually drill in. Inch and 1/8, what is it? Inch and 3/8. We have to remember that number. We can't go any more than 1 1/4 inches from this surface, 1.39 or whatever it was from this surface. So I'm going to drill a hole, and I'm going to check, and I'm going to drill a little more, and I'm going to check just like I did before. All right, so we're about 1.15 inches deep, a little bit shy of where our target is, but we're going to stop there for now, and we can always go in and go a little deeper later, but we're going to hog out the rest of this area now. And see how I left a lip for my lid to sit on? In this cavity, I need to fit a volume knob, a tone knob, a 3-way selector switch, and this 1/4 inch jack. Let's see if we can fit them all in here. I'm going to clean this out here a little more just to get room to put this jack a little lower. I think we got it. And they are going to go here and here, right? The switch is going there, that's going there. My least favorite part of this gig, and it's one more tool that you might not readily have available at your shop that you might need to purchase to make life easier, and it's a very long drill bit. This one is a 1/4 inch, I think. We need to run wires from here into this cavity and here into this cavity, and we also need to run a wire from underneath our bridge to this cavity, which is going to be a ground wire which keeps it from being buzzy and noisy. And so this drill bit is pretty essential. I actually have I have the skinnier one as well that I prefer to use for the ground wire, like 2 sets of wires at one point, so I'll use a thicker one. I can't drill like this and make a straight line into there. I can't even drill like this necessarily and make a straight line into here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in through my neck pocket and drill all the way into there. I'm going to start with my skinny one. Okay. Nice, so we have our 2 wires can come through now and then we can run them through. We're going to make a wider hole here that's going to run all 4 wires from both pickups down. Basically eyeball an angle that's going to land you into this pocket. And this pocket in this design, it shouldn't be too hard, but I've screwed this up many times. I'll use my template to line this all up, and I know that I have this whole area is safe to run my wire. Down a little, and then drill at an angle. And you can see it should have come right out. And that is from the corner of the pickup into this pocket as well. I want to go low because I want to be underneath where the pickups are going to hang, so it's not in the way. But if I go too low, the angle is too steep. I'm hitting this part, so I can't make my angle, and I'll miss. So I'm going to go up just a little bit from the bottom. Okay, you can see that I leaned into the wood a little bit right there, and I chipped it a little bit. If you were doing the pickups, the P90 pickups, that could be a real problem. But for these humbucker pickups, it's not as big of a deal because the trim ring should cover that, like so. But obviously you don't want to mark the front if you don't have to, and you can see the wire goes through like that. I've got room for 2 more wires from the other pickup in the front, and I have my ground wire goes in there. Now is the time in your build when you can really have some fun if you want to. So here's our basic guitar shape, but it's just this sort of flat 2-dimensional thing, and a lot of guitars have contours. Another one of my bodies, you can see what I'm talking about, how it sort of gets thinner at the top and it goes down there. There's lots of ways you can do this kind of shaping. You can do it with belt sander, you can do it by hand with hand planes or with rasps. You can power carve it with things like Arbortech tools or just these flap discs on your angle grinder if you want to. The sky's the limit. You can do as much of this or as little of this as you want to. You can do whatever kind of finish you want, obviously, and like I said, I'm doing kind of just a quickie on this one. You're going to get better results the further you go with all of this. So, okay, while this sits and dries, we will move on to the headstock of the neck. The maple neck that comes with your kit is ready to go, except for the headstock. It is a paddle board, they call this, and where you can design and cut out your own shape. I just thought about just getting a neck with the headstock shape. These are actually a little bit cheaper and easier to get sometimes for the kit, but I decided against it because I don't like using other people's shapes. So this you can do whatever you want with. The kit comes with an inline 6 tuning peg setup, so you have to have all the tuning pegs on the same side for them to work properly. You can't do like a 3 and 3 or anything like that. So you do have that limitation unless you buy your own tuning pegs, but you can do whatever you want for the shape. To aid with that, I included this template of my headstock design that I use. This is something that I CNC out when I make my own necks, and when I buy paddle necks, I use this exact same template to cut them out. In my own shop to do this is I would trace it, I put it there and trace it, and then I just cut it out on the bandsaw and I sand in the finish. You can do pretty much whatever you want. But since it's an inline 6, this line and these holes are what are going to be really important to you. So there's my line. This thicker part of the shaft slides into the wood, and then there is a washer and collar that screws down from the top. You tighten that in, and then you also put a little teeny tiny screw that's included in the kit in there to keep it from moving. If I go up a couple sizes of drill bits to where it fits into this hole nice and tight, it's going to be the 7/16 drill bit. I can use this hole and I can just push a center dot. So now I have my headstock drawn out, and I want to use, not that one, this one. And I have these little dots here where I want to drill out my 25/64 hole. And that should be enough of a third hand so I can safely jigsaw it This whole time I've been using a pretty aggressive and gigantic bit or blade in my jigsaw, and for this I'm going to get a much more smaller and refined blade. To help fight blowout, I'm going to try and drill halfway through each side. Want to put some type of logo up here, you could wood burn something in there, or you could do a toner transfer. If you look up on YouTube, there's several videos on different ways you can do ink toner transfers on that. The neck has like a satin finish on it, and of course where you cut no longer has a finish, so you might want to put a little something on there. You could use whatever. I found that doing something like shellac is a pretty decent blend. Okay, we will let these dry, and then tomorrow assemble our guitar. Ha ha ha! Wasn't that great? Well, welcome to the end of the first video in the series. So by now you have your body made and it's got finish on it, and you are ready to assemble. So go ahead and step to part 2 and learn how to assemble your guitar.